Hello, my creative friend. Do not forget that on Wednesdays we have bite-sized videos, a dose of inspiration to help you on your creative journey, aside from these longer form episodes on Mondays. And also, thank you very much for clicking that like button right now before you minimize the tab and get to your creative work. Now go create something amazing and enjoy the episode. Your Creative Push, episode 362.
Almost every creative person in the world feels some imposter syndrome.
Stop comparing your step 2 to someone else's step 50.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guests today are Tom Ross and Mike Janda. Tom and Mike are successful creative entrepreneurs who have come together to create the Biz Buds Podcast, a value-packed weekly show where they share their journeys from struggling freelancers to both running multi-seven-figure businesses and the lessons that they picked up along the way. And they come on the show today to share some of their knowledge and to give you one of the most value-packed episodes that we've had in a very long time. They share how to find your 1,000 true fans, why you need to share your authentic, real self, and the value of building your fan base and community one person at a time, instead of shouting into the abyss. They share some of their best Instagram growth strategies, how to get in front of a wider audience, and thinking about your audience's audience. They also talk about why you might be more scared when you have less followers and why it's nice to get 10 times the amount of likes that you usually get, but there's something that actually matters more than that. They also talk about the importance of deadlines, the best way to overcome perfectionism, and how to overcome imposter syndrome as a creative. And finally, they explain why you need to start building your email list right now and also what you should be sharing to your email subscribers. Again, this was a highly actionable episode, and you will definitely get some nuggets to bring with you on your creative journey. But it was also a ton of fun talking to those guys, and I know that you're going to be highly entertained as well. So please sit back, relax, and maybe even grab a notepad and a pen to take some notes and enjoy my conversation with Mike Janda and Tom Ross. Mike, Tom, welcome to Your Creative Push, guys.
Thank so much, young man.
Yeah, super excited to be on your show. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I've been following you guys now, watching all your content, and you kind of have this special way of, which I'm sure goes into your strategy for everybody really, to grow on Instagram, to build yourself as a brand. But it's almost like as soon as you watch both of you guys, it's like you become friends, or at least I feel like I already know you guys. Just the way that you put yourselves out there and the way that you give out information in a way that's super helpful. So I kind of already feel like we're friends. But
I feel that way too.
Diving deeper.
I do too.
Yeah. Maybe a good place to start, though, would be to sort of set the stage. Maybe you could each take a turn to sort of introduce yourself and tell how you got to the point you are today.
Awesome. Tom, why don't you go first on this one? You, I think, made me go first last time.
Okay, I'll take it.
Tit for tat.
So, I've been doing this from a very young age. And since I was about 12 years old, I just immersed myself in learning design, creativity, entrepreneurship, marketing, the internet, which was much earlier back then, of course. And I've just been really, really fascinated. So from that young age, it was all kinds of random projects. It was starting websites with friends, learning blogging, doing client work. And this emerged into a lot of failed projects, some more successful ones. I had a reasonably successful freelance career. And then all of these random experiences led me into starting my company 7 years ago, which is Design Cuts. And it's the most curated and most highly rated design marketplace in the world. It's my baby, super proud of it. And we've built an incredible community of over 500,000 creatives there. And, you know, I was really enjoying it and I love my company to this day, but I kind of had this itch that I needed to scratch, because whenever anyone asks me about entrepreneurship, especially for creatives, I just can't stop talking. I get so passionate about it. I just want to help them as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so I started my side hustle, which is my personal brand. And that's the stuff where I get to geek out with awesome people like Mike and just help as many people as we can, and share our passion with the world.
Very cool.
Good intro, Tom. So my background is a designer by university education, and then I launched into my career, bounced around my bottom feeder jobs at the start, then worked my way up to where I was a creative director at Fox Studios. And then after Fox Studios, I started an agency. I grew my agency over 13 years and sold it in 2015. We did work for Disney and Google and Warner Brothers and a whole bunch of great clients that we loved being able to work with. I left the agency that I sold my agency to. I worked for them for a couple of years, and I left there in 2018 to pursue my passion for educating and mentoring and helping my fellow creatives level up in their careers, which is my passion now. It drove me into building a ton of Instagram content, building a great Instagram design community that I love on that platform. And then doing podcasts. My podcast with Tom is so fun, and we love being on podcasts like this. And I'm kind of living the dream right now. So I love what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. And for both of you, like the common theme is like whether it's, quote, bottom feeder jobs or just kind of bouncing around to different things, you both sort of settled in on this passion of helping others. So is that something that the drive that you get to help others, was that something that was instilled throughout the entire journey, and you're just kind of waiting for the point where like all the other ducks are in a line and then you can kind of focus on this one sort of mission? Or is it something that has come as a result of doing all of those things, like learning some mistakes and then wanting to help others?
I think it's kind of both, certainly for me anyway, because this is something I wanted to do for years, but I wanted to ensure I had enough credibility to do it. And so when I was still figuring out this stuff, I didn't want to position myself as the expert that people should perhaps listen to, because I hadn't paid my dues enough at that point. I had to wait until I built a big community and built a reasonably big company before I could confidently talk about doing those things. But in terms of the drive to do it, as I said before, I seriously, I just love this stuff so much. Like my friend's brother mentioned in passing to me that he was starting a creative business, and before I knew it, I was sat down having dinner with the guy drawing business plans on napkins. And that is not the first time that kind of thing's happened. And it doesn't matter how busy my day job keeps me, I always just want to make time for geeking out with people about this stuff.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of, I figured out that I loved this over the course of building my agency. And when I started serving in creative director roles in my career, I started to realize that my biggest passion was around this mentorship, training, guiding a team of people. I just fell in love with that. And I loved that more than working with clients and outputting the work and things like that. The leadership side of it was always a drive and a passion to me. And I paid my dues. I mean, I went through every experience that you probably can go through in this industry. And I love trying to help other people not have to do it the hard way, the way that I did. And I think probably the biggest thing that comes that drives me is that I never had the mentor. I never had the business coach. I was pre-YouTube. When I was growing my agency, it was pre-YouTube boom. There were no channels on YouTube that I could get content like the content I share. So I was just out there floundering, trying to figure it all out myself. And I don't want anybody to feel like that. So I'm kind of really passionate and driven about sharing to help people do it a little bit easier than the way I had to do it.
Right. I love that. And it's something that with social media makes it so much easier to connect to the world, to connect to people. But at the same time, it limits that connection. And you guys have both talked about this and on your Instagram when you were talking about Instagram hacks, Mike, you even mentioned that like your currency is kind of those DMs that you get with people, like the conversations that you have with people. And I think for people that are especially just starting out, like it's so easy to focus on a number where it's like you're growing your number of followers and it's like you're trying to grow your engagement, but we lose sight of the fact that like there's actually people behind that. There's actually people that are behind the computer screens following you, looking for inspiration, or even just looking for that connection and making that connection. That's what I like. I get so much joy out of like an email that I get from somebody that says something about a particular episode that helped them. Like that, I print that out and that's like my binder of like inspiration whenever I don't feel like doing it anymore. So I think for people, it's so important to realize that there's other people on the other end, and it's all about building not that engagement, but like that connection, that one-to-one human connection of helping and inspiring.
Yeah, that to me, like you said, currency, that's the greatest joy in my life right now. Outside of my family, it is this community of people that I know all over the world and that have become my genuine friends. And man, that's just so gratifying and so valuable. It's such a badge of success to me beyond monetary value, financial success. It's this connection that's just so great.
Yeah, I love it too. And we're all about cultivating those true fans. It's so enormously important to us. And it's coming from that position of just genuinely loving people. You know, it's not a tactic, it's just fun. Like it's really fun to learn about other people, to befriend other people. And a lot of my history learning marketing, I had to drift through a lot of terrible advice out there. There's a lot of better advice out there, like, you know, this podcast. But back in the day, when you tried to teach yourself internet marketing, it was just sleaze city. That was all it was. And so everything reduced people to numbers. Everything was like, you know, churning them through this funnel and all that kind of stuff. And even now, it's like Mike and I often push back against the culture of you know, just engagement for engagement's sake and hacking the algorithm. That's not really what we're all about. We're much more about community, cultivating those true fans, building real friendships and connections, because I think that's more fun, it's more rewarding, it's more genuine, and it has more longevity as well for your brand.
Well, let's go down that route then. What are some, because you guys have a podcast episode devoted to this, finding your true fans, kind of based off of that, 1,000 true fans, which I don't know if that number has gone up over the years now. Now you need more like 10,000 true fans or how that works.
I think you need less in cases, to be honest.
You think less?
I think that holds true, yeah.
Okay, well, what's some of your guys' takeaways or advice for people listening, artists maybe just starting out to find those true fans?
But, I think there's a step number one to me is share your authentic, real self. Because what you're trying to find are like-minded people who love the things that you love and care about the things that you care about and think the way that you think. Those are going to be the connections, the real fans that you have. And those are going to be the people who, like you said at the start, who feel like they already know you, who are already friends. There's no question, Youngman, we started before we jumped on the podcast talking about football and sports and things. We connected there. We connect on creative world view of things. We've connected on a lot of things, and we've talked for all of 15 minutes in our lives so far, but we've connected on so many different levels because we weren't afraid to share about ourselves. And when you share about yourself, then it allows the people who are like you to find you and connect with you. So step number one to finding your true fans is share the things you love, share the things you're passionate about, share your ideas, share your hobbies, share who you really are. And then people who are like you are going to find you and they're going to become your true fans.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And it's a classic case of put out what you want to get back. Because if you're putting out a knockoff version of someone else and you're being a bit of a fraud with that, well, you might not get the people you truly want back. But when you are being authentic, like Mike just alluded to, often you will attract very like-minded, aligned friends and people, which is so powerful. I guess my point to add to Mike's would be to build fans and community one person at a time. because I think what every person out there seems to do is shout into the abyss, is the phrase I like to use. So if you think of social media, it's so busy, right? So much noise. Think of that like a tornado in your face. And what people do is they walk up to the tornado and just shout into it. And immediately the words leaving their mouth just gets, whipped away in this wind. And that's what it feels like. We push our voice out, we push our content out, and it just disappears into this abyss of noise. And I think the most effective and rewarding way to cut through all of that is just one by one by one building relationships, not trying to think scalable, not trying to break through the algorithm, not trying to get 100,000 followers, just to go make one friend and then go make another friend and then a relationship with someone else. And it's so controllable. It's so rewarding. So whilst everyone else is there saying, hey, I've been doing this for 9 months and no one's listening, you're over there with 400 fantastic new friends that you've made one person at a time. And you're having great conversations. You're building a real community. You're getting to know each other. It's just a way, way better way of doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's one of the realizations that I've had on the 4 years of this podcast is the idea that with almost everything that you do as a creative person, as a human, it's so easy to look ahead and how the goalpost keeps moving, and you're never going to reach that point where you're completely satisfied with your style of art, with your skills, and also with your follower count. Like you could tell yourself, once I get 1,000 followers, I'm going to be happy, or like that's going to be my true fans. Once you hit that point, it's going to be 2,000 or 10,000. Like you're never going to be happy. So like accept that fact so you can be grateful for what you do have and what you have built. Because if you keep looking towards the future, you're completely ignoring the present. You're completely ignoring the past. You're completely ignoring the things that you've built. The people that have said, okay, like I'm on board. Like I'm going to follow you. I'm going to, I connect with you. I resonate with you. If you're just focused on what's next, you're completely ignoring what you've built.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yep.
And the other thing that with what Mike was saying about putting your true self out there too, when you can put your true self out there, that is sometimes like the hardest thing to do, to like be honest and be, vulnerable and putting yourself out there. But once you can kind of do that, you get more comfortable when people will resonate with that, and you start building that like those true fans that really are on board with what you're talking about. It makes you much more comfortable to be yourself.
Yeah. I found that, as I started sharing video content, and that was the toughest thing, because you're like, oh my gosh, it is. Is anybody going to like me? That's what you start thinking. And the truth is that yes, some people are going to like you. Everybody has likable traits. So yes, people will like you. So have a little bit of confidence to share yourself out there. But the confidence level at the start, but the confidence level is going to go up as you grow in followers. It is so much easier for me to make an Instagram story where I'm talking to the camera. It's so much easier for me to do that now with over 100,000 followers than it was when I had 1,000 followers. Because the fear at 1,000 is, oh no, all these people are so valuable. I don't want to make any of them not like me. I don't want any of them to not follow me anymore. You have more fear when you're smaller than when you're big. You think of Gary Vee, and look how natural. I shouted out Gary Vee before Tom did. Tom does a weekly shout out to Gary Vee on our podcast. But you look at how comfortable he is on video of just being his natural self, saying whatever comes to his mind, completely comfortable. He has millions and millions of followers as a result of being so authentic and comfortable sharing video. So when you have that smaller audience, start practicing knowing that you don't have the masses to talk to. So look at it as practice. Yes, you have 400 followers, then and only 5% of them are going to see your post anyway with Instagram's algorithm. 5% of your audience is going to see it unless it starts getting shared. So share it as practice when you're smaller. And then as you get bigger, your confidence is just going to be so much higher, because you're going to have the motivation of, wow, I do have 30,000 people who like me and care about what I say. I have this fan base built up.
Yeah, I think that is definitely accurate. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but often you'll get some people where their profile, I'm not talking designers, it could be celebrities and people, where their profile is almost the more typical highlight reel of just look at me and my awesome life. And then very occasionally they do a post where they're just, almost shockingly vulnerable, and they open up about something. Without fail, if you go through their post, that tends to be the absolute top performing post in terms of comments and engagement. And it's not people being like, oh, your Lamborghini looks fire or whatever. It's people being like, I'm here for you. This is so brave. Thanks for sharing. I'm going through something similar. And I'm not saying you have to, like, every time you start crying about something, you have to put a camera in your face. But I think there's something to be said. And, Mike and I, we regularly do share the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I always try and push very hard against that highlight reel. I think it's very damaging. If I ever have a period of time where I'm kind of on a high with work, people message me and say, this is kind of intimidating. It seems like you're always on and super productive. So I never hide away when I'm burning out or struggling. I share that too, because people are like, this makes me feel so much better. You're a human being.
Tom shares when he goes to the gym and it makes people feel like they're a lot stronger than they really are. It's that.
Oh, I love it.
And that's, okay, anyway.
You had to get it in.
I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop myself. But that is so valuable to so many people, Tom, that you share that, and it motivates them to feel better about themselves.
I'm a very inspiring man. What can I say, Michael?
You are. You're so
very inspiring. Well, you guys had a double episode where you shared Instagram growth strategies, and so we're definitely going to link this in the show notes page, because I think it's a must listen for people, because the amount of just tips and strategies you guys shared was kind of mind blowing, and a couple things that I never thought about, namely responding to everybody that sends you a DM or shares your story or comments on your story, using that as an opportunity to cultivate a relationship with them, and not just cultivating a relationship with them, but doing so through like video or voice messages. And I don't know, just a lot of just actionable takeaway tips for people. So we'll definitely link that up. But I was wondering, maybe you guys could share maybe like your top 1 or 2 tips for people, things that you think that people, especially like visual artists or creative people that are on Instagram, aren't thinking about, that they could be, that could help them to build that audience, but hopefully build those true fans as well.
Oh, this is good. Mike, should we tennis match it? We like a tennis match. We'll go back and forth until Youngman, you're like, guys, shut up. We have a time limit on this episode.
No, tennis match it up.
All right.
Who's serving first?
Mike is, because he's pretty greedy like that. He likes to get that first.
So, okay. It's tit for tat. The thing that I would start with is that the real connections happen in the DMs. The likes and comments and shares and all that stuff is all great. But if you want to connect with people on a real level, it has to be in the DMs. And if you're not receiving DMs that you can reply to, I reply to every DM. I have 135,000 followers. I reply to every single DM, and I spend a couple hours a day in my Instagram DMs just connecting with people. And it's so surprising when people message me and they're like, I can't believe you replied to me. I never thought you would even see my message. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm so grateful that you reached out to me from Poland. My new friend Lydia in Poland, she's like, I can't believe that you even replied. And I'm like, I can't believe you messaged me. You're in Poland. It's so exciting for me. That's my mindset in the DMs. I'm so grateful for those. So the real connections happen in the DMs, and that's where you got to be. And if you're not receiving DMs from your audience because your audience is too small, then you need to be the instigator of DMs to your audience. So don't be afraid to message them. If you're not getting DMs, message the people that follow you and say, hey, thanks so much for following me. Any type of content you want to see. This is a hack from Tom to our friend in Australia. You instigate. If you're not receiving DMs, you instigate the DMs and reach out to your people.
So when I think of DMs, I think of like behind the scenes. So I think of it separate than my feed. Does that like interacting with your audience in that way, does that help with like the engagement or like the algorithm or whatever you want to call it on Instagram? Or is it just like for cultivating for yourself, cultivating those true fans?
It's both, I believe.
Yeah, the algorithm prioritizes your content to the people in the DMs. It tracks that from what I understand. I'm not an algorithm expert.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're interacting with somebody in the DM, the likelihood of them seeing your post goes way higher.
Right. And I guess also the likelihood of just them like having that reaction, like, oh, I can't believe you responded to me, as opposed to kind of ghosting them. Like you've just developed that fan or like kind of cultivated it. So, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
My points would be in terms of growth and distribution, because we could talk about true fans and building community all day, but I think people often do think, how can my work reach more people? And there's really two key ways. There's either it being shared by your existing people, or there's getting in front of a wider audience. And I feel like people often just keep blindly posting without thinking about these things. They don't really understand those two pillars. So again, it's either shareability with your current audience, and with that, it's thinking what motivates people to share. And when you think of your behavior on social media, we just scroll past. We barely ever stop to actually like and comment, let alone share something to our feed. It's quite a rare thing that people do that. And so you need to think what kind of content triggers that behavior. And it's normally something where it can be, very topical, maybe something around current affairs. It could be incredibly like entertaining or informative or useful, or it can be an extension of that person's character and personality. Because often, I don't know if you guys can kind of allude to this as well, but often I will share stuff where it's kind of like someone else perfectly said something that I believe and that I want to say. And so I'll then put it in my stories. Do you guys do that as well?
Yep.
And yet when we're making content, often it's more like we're making it for us. So what I would say is, don't make it for you. Don't even make it always for your audience. Make it for your audiences. Make it something that your audience is actually going to feel motivated to share with their audience, because maybe it helps speak for them, or it's something which, they're going to want to pass on.
This is a new nugget from Tom. I haven't heard this one. I like
Ooh.
It is new. I've been really digging into
exclusive.
this recently, though. Yeah, I've been looking at the patterns of what gets shared and what doesn't on my platform and others, and I really think that's kind of the key. Quite often we don't think about shareability. We just try and make good content, as vague a thing as that is. But I think there definitely is a few mechanisms that kind of make stuff more shareable. So anyway, that's number one, but that's kind of pretty hard to do, right? To get that real sharing hit. The one which is more controllable is getting in front of wider audiences. And we like to refer to this as distribution. And there's 1,000 ways to do it. We covered a bunch in the episodes that you listen to, Youngman, but you can do stuff like guest posts. You can get into, like right now, this is distribution, right? We're getting in front of your audience. And Mike used a great analogy of ponds. You have your own pond, but other people have their ponds, and how do you get in their ponds? I think when you get into a distribution mindset and get out of the bubble of like, well, I'm creating stuff and it's just for my audience and it's what they want to see, it's what I want to put out, and you never look up and think wider than that, that's really going to hinder your growth. And when you actually start thinking, well, who am I trying to reach? Who are my people? Where are they? Where do they spend their time? Where are there existing bigger communities that have those people in them? And how can I hack and figure out ways to get in front of them? That's really where you're going to unlock a lot of growth.
I love that. Actually, when I was done listening to that double episode I mentioned, I sat there and I just thought about the fact, like how I've been using my Instagram. And for a while I was just sharing quotes from the episode and like kind of half that and half sharing like people's art that follow me, like things, resharing, like you said. And I was growing a lot. And I a couple months ago, I started my YouTube channel, and now I've been losing followers on Instagram. And I was thinking about it, and I tried to like think about it honestly. And I wouldn't follow me, because all I'm doing now is just sharing promotional content to try to get people off of Instagram to go to my YouTube and to go to the podcast. And I was just thinking about it, like, I wouldn't follow me. Like, all I'm doing is promoting. And then I started sharing quotes and stuff like that without the intention of driving people elsewhere just to give like sort of inspiration, and those were like 5x the amount of, likes or profile visits and all that. Sometimes it's just sitting back, looking at why you're sharing what you're sharing. Are you sharing the same thing over and over again? Or like, if you were one of your followers, would you care? Like, would you want to keep following me? You know what I mean?
Yep. I have to jump in here because I think that's so true, and invariably promotions and content of that nature does tend to under-index when it comes to engagement by its very nature. But I think it's so important that your content that does do well is well connected to whatever business model or premium offering you have. So what I mean by that is it's very easy for any of us to kind of put out like fodder. We can put content out that makes us feel like it's successful because it gets a lot of likes or a lot of comments and it makes us feel good. But if it doesn't directly kind of funnel people back to what we ultimately want them to do, then it's kind of, decent content arguably, but it's not actually going to help our business. And we experienced this with my company. We were putting out content that was getting a lot of views and a lot of likes, but there was a bit of a disconnect where it was attracting a certain type of person, but it didn't really map back to what we sold as a business. So if what we did as a business was like lynda.com or courses or something of that nature, it would have been a perfect kind of, path back from the free content to the premium content. But as it was, there was this disconnect and it just wasn't really converting very well. And so I think this is something everyone needs to consider, because otherwise you go down the path of, well, that got 5 times as many likes, so I'm going to keep doing more of that. And people don't pause to think like, well, actually, is that helping my business, or is that just fueling my ego?
I love what you said, Youngman. If you were a follower, you wouldn't follow you.
Yeah.
It's such a great question to ask yourself. That's the decider right there. And it all comes down, any marketing distills down to that. It distills down to understanding your target customer and then speaking to the needs of the target customer. That's the bare bones, raw essence of marketing. So if we want to backtrack all the way back to where we should have started at the start of this conversation, who are you even talking to? That's step number 1 in growing any kind of thought leadership platform, from a podcast to Instagram to YouTube, anything else in between. It's all about, who are you talking to? What are the problems that they're facing in their life or business right now? And then how do you solve those problems? How do you empower them to solve those problems through the content that you share? And if you get back down to the root of what people should be thinking about when they're starting any kind of thought leadership channel, social media sharing of any sort, it goes back down to that. Who are you talking to? Start there.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what would be a good ratio? Should every post that you have, like say for a visual artist, for example, like they post a work or a work in progress, like should they always be at least in the comments, like linking back to their website? Should they be promoting, say they have a course on how to, do watercolors, or if they have, their prints for sale, for example, like should you always be directing or have that availability for somebody that's going to go into the comment or go into the caption and read about it? What's the playbook here?
Mike, I feel like you're 0.1% selling. You're so non-selling. You're just free content forever.
Yeah, that's my mindset. My mindset is build your audience. Your true fans will dig and find ways to engage with you on a deeper level. That's kind of the mindset that I take. I'll give you an example. For the past year, when I started growing my audience on Instagram, I also started doing some business coaching for creatives to help them through their business challenges. And I never marketed it more than just what I just said right there. I've mentioned it a handful of times on our podcast. I've never thrown up an Instagram story saying, hey, if you want business coaching and you're a creative, I'm your guy. Mm-hmm. I've never done that ever. I had a page on my website that's, a one page that explains what it is, but I've never promoted it in any kind of salesy manner. And every single week for a year, I've had new coaching customers. I've had to limit the quantity of slots that I have open because people find it. They like my content. They like what I have to share. They like my personality because I've been authentic in my videos. They think that they know me already because they've consumed so much of my content. I get on a call and we just jump right in like we're old friends, but I don't promote it. I don't sell it. So we're in a world now, 2020 and beyond. It actually started probably in about 2014 or so, where people, for the most part, social media has transformed the way that we purchase, and people prefer the perception of making a purchase decision themselves and not being sold to make the purchase. They don't like the salesman thing. So, we mentioned Gary Vee. He has products out there. He has books. He has materials that you can consume that are paid materials. And I'm sure he sells millions of books. But I never see him on any of his content say, hey, and if you like this content, check out my book. He doesn't do it. It's just a byproduct of him building thought leadership. And then people who are interested will dig deeper and find his books and buy his books. So I think
can I jump in for a sec, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because obviously, being the Gary Vee fan that I am, I followed his journey for a lot of years. And what you said is kind of partially true, but not entirely, because he exercises what he teaches in his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, where the jabs are free content and the right hook is a hard sell. And when I say hard sell, that's not a bad thing. And he says himself in his content, when you're selling, sell. Where it becomes sleazy and disingenuous is if you're trying to like make out like it's not a sell or do a bait and switch or something like that. So he's very like, when you're selling, be upfront about it and sell hard. And he actually sells harder than anyone I know, but he just does so incredibly sporadically. And he puts out such a tidal wave of free content all the time that he's got such powerful and extensive amount of jabs that his right hook, as hard as that is, doesn't feel that offensive because everyone has context that he's such a giver. And so actually when he does release a book, it only seems to happen every couple of years. So this is, Mike, maybe why you haven't seen him do this that aggressively.
Sure.
But he sells hard. I mean, literally it'll be like a full month of like just shouting this book from the rooftop, doing all kinds of deals. He's trying to say, if you buy 100 books, I'll show up at your house and all kinds of crazy stuff, just trying to barter. He gets every single friend in his network. He hit them up one by one and get them to shout about it. He will be on every industry podcast shouting about the book. He pushes it so hard. That's what breaks it out in the bestsellers list and sells a ton of copies. But when that month is over, he then just goes back to jabbing and providing free value and building brand equity, which he can then leverage in another 2 years' time. So what he doesn't do is every single post say, here's some free content. And remember, buy my book. He will just build and build and build, and then he'll sell hard and then build and build and build.
I like it. That's a great approach. And that book is great. Jab, 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 Right Hook, by the way, as a shout out.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's one, if you're trying to grow on social media, it's a great book to start with. Really helps you understand the environment.
And I know, Mike, you've recently launched your course, which is fantastic, and you didn't sell it super hard, but I think if you had sold it a bit harder, no one would have judged you. But the very fact that you did announce it and you did a post and said, my course is here, that's great because you've just spent a full year of giving.
Yeah.
So no one can fault you for sharing something that's awesome that you worked on and selling it that way. But Youngman, what you said you were doing where it was like every single post was a push and a sell and you were losing followers, obviously that's kind of just right hooking someone to death without the jabs.
Yeah.
It gets tiring too, being the person punching.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. So all this talk about Instagram and growing your following on Instagram and social media, I think everybody knows the importance of building a newsletter. And it's something that I only just started like a few months ago. But I know you've talked about this before. Can you maybe talk about why it's good to build a newsletter? Maybe not because you want to jab, and right hook them, but just to bring them off of social media so that you're not under the YouTube algorithm or the Instagram algorithm or whatever algorithm that's not in your control at all, to bring it back into your control, and why especially artists and creative people want to do that for their following, people that enjoy their content. Maybe they don't have something to sell yet, but they want to have their tribe be sort of in their control.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you answered that question. It is platform independent. You own your email list. Those are your connections. Take Gary Vee, for example. He has this text me 212 number, text him. And what's the point of texting him? It's to get his audience outside of Instagram and outside of TikTok and wherever else he's sharing. It's to get them out of that and into a different platform that he controls that is not dependent upon the algorithm shifts decided by some other social media giant. The owners of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg's going to decide what gets seen on Instagram. Now, not actually him, but
I trust him.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody does. Full disclosure, I own Facebook stock and I want it to do really well. So,
yeah.
But the point is that you want to get the point and the benefit of a email list is that it's platform independent. You can communicate into the inbox of the people that you are reaching out to.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the main benefits, is sidestepping the algorithm. Another one is just the performance, because it's widely known that email has gone backwards over the last decade plus, where open rates used to be substantially higher. But even with them very much down on what they were, they're now in the kind of 20, 30, 40%, maybe on the upper end for open rates. I think statistically, there was a recent study, it's 15 times more effective than social media at driving sales. It's just a different order of magnitude still. So I really think email is still the leader. You know, the money is still in the list, as people say. And so what you guys are alluding to with the algorithm, we're actually seeing a really interesting shift now in terms of platforms, where I think people are moving, in terms of marketers, they're moving back into email more aggressively, away from social, as the algorithm continues to slip on the dominant platforms. There's text marketing, like Mike mentioned, which is becoming bigger and bigger for the same reason. There's more investment in podcasts like this one, because right now we have all the attention, right? The people listening to us, you, the listener at home, this is not the equivalent of on Instagram, you flying through a feed at the speed of light and maybe or maybe not seeing our content. And if you do, you probably just count as one impression, but fly straight past it. Right now, we are in your ears, and we're the only people in your ears, because that's the nature of how podcasts work. And similar thing with, you know, LinkedIn is showing better organic reach. Stuff like Facebook groups as well are providing little private havens away from the algorithm. It is this perpetual dance of the landscape of social media and marketing, where people will kind of move into what's easiest and what actually gives them the most leverage, and move away from what gets tougher, which unfortunately in this case is organic reach dying across the board.
Right. Yeah, and mentioning about podcasts especially, social media, I think as a whole, the internet as a whole, wants everything to be much shorter, much quicker. Like attention spans are getting like lower and lower, and it's the podcasting and I guess being able to build a newsletter and kind of control the timing of everything makes it so you can go a little bit deeper. And when you go deeper, that's when you can build that deeper connection as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a fight for attention, and arguably, yes, attention spans are going down, but I think attention spans are not a fixed thing. They adapt to the context of the platform. So people have a lot more attention when they're in podcast mindset versus when they're on TikTok, and if it doesn't impress them in half a second, they're on to the next video.
But the podcast, they throw it on their commute, on the train, in their car. They throw it on when they're at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
They're listening to it as background music in their life, and you get a longer attention span when people listen in those kinds of environments.
Yeah,
a lot of people listen to them when they're working. You know, they just have a podcast running while they're working, and so I think these things are valuable. Tom and I love our podcast because we love to talk deeper about this stuff. We love to dig in. We love to try and distill things down into actionable tips that you can't fit into a 10-slide carousel post on Instagram. And you can't get it into a, you know, if we were launching hour-long videos every week, that's a tough sell to get somebody to sit and watch your video. Freak, I'll turn on Ozark, and can I get through 15 minutes before I get the Jimmy leg and want to do something else? It's hard because my visual attention span is so jumpy because of us being preconditioned to these smaller time segments. And so I think the podcast platform, when you can just have it be streaming in your ears and you're doing other things, is such a great platform to really dig deep on concepts, ideas, actionable tips, takeaway stories that are memorable, authentic sharing. All these things can happen to podcasts. It's such a great platform and a unique type of content that doesn't exist in these other platforms.
Well, it's the humanity of it as well. Some of my favorite messages we get with our show is when people are like, I was walking down the street and I burst out laughing and everyone looked at me like I was crazy. Yeah. You don't always get that with an Instagram post, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we move away from the email list, what would you say for like an artist or a creative person that's building their email list, or maybe even has already, doesn't know what to share? Like, how often should they be sending out an email to their audience, and what exactly should they be sharing?
Tom, this is a good question for you because you've recently started to up your email list and or you're up your email sharing. And you just a shout out to Tom. He's got a great email newsletter with a lot of authentic sharing in it that I actually look forward to seeing it. And you've been spot on the last couple of talking about things that people care about right now. So I've appreciated those. And I think you're doing a great job compared to what a lot of people do, where it comes across a little more salesy than what you do. So why don't you answer that question now that I shouted you out and
thanks,
made everybody think
he's not always a bully.
This is going to be such a great answer from Tom. Tom, take it away.
And it's all thanks to Gary V.
Yeah, thank you, Gary and Mike. I'm going to actually I'm going to be rarely braggadocious here, because this is something that not everyone knows about me because I don't publicize it a lot. Email newsletters are actually my jam. I've done them for a lot of years, and I am kind of the unofficial coach for about 50 of the biggest creatives in the industry, where a lot of people don't know that I've kind of helped them set up their newsletter, or they've had a newsletter. And my experience means with everyone I've worked to, the average results have been between a 500 to 1,000% increase in their newsletter growth.
Damn, Tom.
So much so, I've been literally building a course to help creatives grow an email newsletter. So this is quite a fun topic for me to talk on. So I think, Youngman, you asked about frequency and what content to share and that kind of thing. So let's deal with frequency first. The main thing is consistency more than anything, because I know people that put out a great newsletter that's daily, and I know other people that put out a great newsletter that's monthly. What doesn't work is when it's sporadic, where they post, once a week for 4 weeks, and then they take a break for 2 months, and then they get back into it. Then you lose any kind of momentum and relationship with your subscribers. So it needs to be consistent, and it needs to operate like people's favorite TV show. They need to be looking forward to it each week, or however often you send out. So there is no kind of perfect number. Like I say, if it's great content, every day actually doesn't bother people. They don't view it as spammy if it brings them tremendous daily value. And equally, if you can't handle that and it becomes a monthly newsletter, if it's super valuable and people know to expect it, that's fantastic too. So hopefully that kind of addresses the question of frequency. In terms of content, there's a billion options, right? I love newsletters because they can be, as Mike said, mine tends to be, they can be that much more personal. I feel like when you write a newsletter, you should be writing it almost like you would to a friend, because that's going to give a tonality that people want to read. It's going to feel like it's talking to them directly instead of just the shouty, spammy, generic message. So in terms of tonality, that's where I would go with it. And then, of course, in terms of the subject matters and topics you share, that's entirely dependent on the work you're putting out. But there's tons of people. Like, I just helped James Martin, incredible logo designer, to launch his newsletter. He's now got a few thousand subscribers in the first week or so. And he uses it to point people to fantastic content he's doing on YouTube and other platforms. That's one way you can do. You can do like a kind of compilation of all your best content. He does a Q&A, which was a cool idea we cooked up, where each week he will say, if you have a question, hit reply to this email and directly email me back with a question, and I will pick the best question and answer it in next week's newsletter. So that's a cool thing that you can do as well. There's just tons of things. I think the newsletter people, because they're so valuable to you and your brand and your business, you need to really, really over deliver to them. So it's like they should be the ones to get sneak peeks and special treatment and discounts and that kind of thing. They should be the people where you're getting that audience feedback. They should be the people where they get, exclusive freebies and gives and just incredible stuff that no one else in your wider community can get. So I'm a huge believer in like really just thinking outside the box. How do you over deliver to these people? Because they are going to be the whole backbone of your business.
Before we get to the final push, I want to be mindful of your guys' time. So I had a whole list of stuff I wanted to talk about. So maybe we could have you guys on again in the near future. But maybe between these three things, imposter syndrome, avoiding burnout, and overcoming perfectionism, maybe you could either both pick the same topic or, pick whichever one you want, and maybe give your best tip for people to get over those types of resistances that we all deal with.
Mike, how do you feel about getting one each? And I'd love to shotgun perfectionism, if that's okay.
Okay, so wait, so you're going to do perfectionism and I have to pick a different one?
Hey, Mike, how do you feel about us each doing a different one and I get to pick this one?
Yeah.
I love it.
That sounds good, Tom. Thanks. So why don't I give you my tips about how to overcome perfectionism, and I'll go first, Tom. And then you can go with your
very
next
kind
thing. Actually, I'll take imposter syndrome because this is near and dear to my heart. Imposter syndrome, there are a couple things about imposter syndrome. Number one, you have to realize that almost every creative person in the world feels some imposter syndrome. We, by nature of being the breed of creatives, are naturally predisposed to imposter syndrome. And then we breed insecurity into our creatives when they go to school and they get critiqued all day long by their professor and their classmates, and everybody's critiquing them and they become insecure. And we breed it into the people through these experiences. So it's so hard to overcome it. So I think step number one on overcoming imposter syndrome is understand that you are not alone in feeling it. I still feel it. There are so many times when I'm getting ready to post something and I'm like, oh man, is anybody going to like this? And then it gets thousands and thousands of likes and hundreds of comments and tons of DMs that explode off of it. And I almost didn't even post it because of imposter syndrome. So there's that mindset. It happens no matter what somebody's accomplished in their career, they likely feel some imposter syndrome. And then the other point I would make about it is embrace it. Because if you're not feeling some imposter syndrome, then you're not putting yourself into situations that make you uncomfortable. You're not pushing yourself to do new things. So embrace it when you feel it. Embrace it and say, okay, well, I'm feeling a little imposter syndrome going on here. I'm a little insecure about doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I got to push myself into feeling comfortable and feeling like I can do this. I got to push myself. So feeling a little imposter syndrome is a sign that you're putting yourself into positions that will help you grow. So embrace it when you feel it.
Yeah, I love that. And I always liken it to nervous farts. Like when you get those nervous farts about doing something, like that's when you know that it's important. And like you said, it's almost like a litmus test for whether or not something's worth it. And it's so interesting. I just finished rereading for like the 10th time, The War of Art. And Stephen Pressfield says like how like the more we care about something or the more important something is to us to like getting to our higher self or just to our existence, like the more resistance we face, like the more fears of imposter syndrome we have before we post it. And it's so interesting how I've experienced that so many times when I'm like, I don't know if I should post this. I don't know if this is the right content. I don't know if I'm putting myself too much out there. Will anybody really relate to it? And then that's the thing that takes off.
Yep.
Was it also Stephen Pressfield who said the nervous fart is indeed the litmus test of confidence?
Yeah, I totally stole that quote from him. The nervous farts. Nervous farts equals litmus test.
I love that. There's your Instagram post.
There it is.
All right. So if I'm taking perfectionism, my main feedback to people listening would be the best way to overcome perfectionism is to realize it doesn't exist. Perfect literally does not exist. And the quicker you realize that, the quicker you stop striving for it. There is no perfect, there is only better. And the best way to get better is just to keep doing. And so perfectionism is often people who are trying to go like 0 to 60 miles an hour. You can't just leap over paying your dues. You can't leap over the work it takes to get very good. And this is something Ira Glass talks about in his much lauded essay, The Gap, where he says we can kind of see where we want to reach and we're frustrated we're not there yet, but we have to put in the work to actually, go through the journey of getting there. It's so key. And often people ask us questions like, at what point am I going to be good enough or perfect enough to charge or be able to sell my work or whatever it might be? And this kind of infers that there's a finite point where you go to bed one day and you're not good enough and you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, cool, I'm good enough. Now I can do that. And of course, that's nonsense. So that's just kind of further validation and proof that it's not about that definitive finite moment. It's about every day showing up and realizing that by doing that, you would just edge better and better and better in what you're doing.
Yeah, that's perfect advice. And you actually, Tom, you had a YouTube video where somebody asked the question to you, like, what about for design, like designers, like when you have this moment or this client or this opportunity where it's like you really do have to, like it does have to be perfect. So like what's your answer to that? Like when a huge opportunity comes for someone or you like a visual artist like knows that this thing will resonate with their audience, or like they just have this profound idea where like this thing, I'm getting so many nervous farts, this thing like definitely matters and I want to put so much time into it. Where's like then the line of like how long to spend on that thing, but not taking it too long or making it too perfect so that you never put it out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually can't remember what my answer was because I did so many hundreds of episodes answering questions. But first of all, I just want to say, Youngman, and I'm sure Mike's the same, we really appreciate the research you've put in. Like, it's really nice to come on a show and it's like you've listened to like a bunch of our stuff on all platforms. Like,
well, it's good stuff. It's easy to listen to.
Well, I appreciate that. But no, it's really the sign of like a good host, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, with that, I'm not saying don't invest time to make something really special. Like, of course, if it's a gigantic client or a very pivotal, important project in your career, work super hard. Like, I've had plenty of times where I pulled all-nighters, pulled out all the stops and made it as fantastic as I can possibly make it. But I think this is where deadlines become quite useful. And invariably, you tend to have at least a rough one when it comes to client work. If you're given forever to work on something, you could tinker on it forever. But if the client says, well, we have to launch this next week, you're going to work to make it as good as you possibly can within a week. And I think that's it, right? Yes, like do all you can to make it as fancy and special as you can, but realize it will never be perfect. You could probably tweak it forever. And at a certain point, you're going to have to just ship it.
Perfect answer. All right, guys, it's time for the final push, and I apologize for keeping you so long. But
no, it's our pleasure.
No, love
it's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions. And Mike, you go first.
Oh, man. Good. All right. My advice to you is that everything is going to work out okay. You're going to have a roller coaster adventure in your creative career. You're going to have times when you feel like, oh my gosh, why am I even doing this? I hate my life. And you're going to have times when things are so amazing and you have so much work and you just won a big award and everything seems like it's going like clockwork. And my advice to you, and I'm big on this because I didn't do it for so long, but enjoy the whole ride of it all. Everything's going to turn out okay. You're not going to end up homeless. You're not going to never get another job. All these fears, you're not going to lose all your money. You're not going to have those things actually happen in your life. The majority of the people are going to turn out better in the end from going through all the experiences, good, bad, and ugly, that you're going to have in your career. So just embrace it and enjoy the ride and learn and grow and progress. You're going to wake up 20 years from now and realize, oh my gosh, look at all the things that I've accomplished. Look at all the things that have happened in my career. You're going to have so much gratitude for it. So that's what's ahead for you. And I hope you find that. And I'm doing much better today at doing that than I was 20 years ago in my career. I was the scared, frantic freelancer, afraid of what was going to come next. That's my advice.
Perfect.
That's a pretty hard act to follow, Mike.
It is. Tough one.
Let's just end the podcast then, Tom. Just don't even give it a shot. Just kidding. Tom will have a great answer.
All right, I'm going to be more concise than that. I'm going to be more concision.
Okay.
I'm just going to advise. I'm touching the shoulder right now in a reassuring, fatherly way here.
Mm-hmm.
I would advise that a lot of happiness comes from stop comparing your step 2 to someone else's step 50. I think so much unhappiness comes from like, why the hell are you comparing yourself to someone who's 30 years your senior in terms of their career progress? Yeah. And something I'm obsessed with doing is I find inspiring people and I reverse engineer their success. I go back to their earliest content. I see the rough videos they put out. I see the content with no engagement. I see the early stages, which are more comparable to where I'm at now. And I get enormous inspiration and reassurance from doing that.
I love that. Yeah. And
it's super good advice.
Like seeing your entire journey as like early stages. Like it's just, you might be 5 years down the line and you might have come a long way from 5 years ago, but it's like looking forward to like you're in the early stages to 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're constantly on that journey and it's like a life thing that you've taken on. So that's great.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to say it's better and more profound advice than Mike's, but Youngman, I guess I'll let you be the judge of that.
Well, it was pretty profound.
I mean, for sure. I really can't decide. We'll have to ask the audience.
Very
decide,
diplomatic.
But... Okay. Send me a DM if you think that my advice is better than Tom's, and then I'll let Tom know.
And if you think my advice was better, send Mike a DM too, just to annoy him.
He will respond. Guys, this was super, super inspiring and super fun too. So thank you so much for coming on, giving your story and giving your advice. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Youngman.
Thank you for having us.
Seriously, one of the most fun ones we've done.
Yay! Awesome. Me too.
Yeah, really fun.
And for everybody listening, you can find Mike on Instagram. He has more Janda. That's Janda. And on his website, michaeljanda.com. Tom is Tom Ross Media on Instagram and tomross.co. And you can get the Biz Buds Podcast everywhere that podcasts are found. And do not fear, we will have links to everything I mentioned and everything we mentioned in the episode today at yourcreativepush.com/362. Mike, Tom, thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Youngman.
Oh, man, I told you that was a value-packed episode. My thank you once again to Mike and Tom for providing such a great episode. I can't wait to get those guys back on the show, and I can't wait to keep listening to the Biz Buds podcast. If you liked this episode, you're definitely going to get a ton of takeaways from their show, and I do highly suggest that Instagram growth strategies double episode. We'll have that linked up at today's show notes page. But before I get to my takeaway, I know that there's a ton of takeaways that you probably got from this. And it's one of those episodes that, depending on where you are in your creative journey, you're going to have different takeaways. And if you go back to listen to this in a year or so, you'll probably have different takeaways than you do today. And that being said, definitely take them up on what they said, even if they might have been joking. DM them. Jump on Instagram and DM them and tell them which maybe final push you liked better, or just tell them the best takeaway that you had from this episode. Like they said, they get back to everybody that DMs them. So go ahead and DM them and let's give them a giant hello and a giant thank you from the Your Creative Push community. But my big takeaway, aside from the whole rethinking of the Your Creative Push Instagram account, was the notion of being okay with building your following one subscriber, one follower, one person at a time. And this really gets to the heart of the trap that I think that we all fall into, myself definitely included, where when we start sharing our work and we start sharing our creativity and we start sharing our presence on social media, we lose sight of the fact that we are, as we're building a following, we are actually building a following of people. We cater less towards the actual human beings on the other end of the screen, and we cater more towards the algorithm, this ethereal beast of a thing that we can't quite grasp, but we're all trying to cater towards and to play towards. A perfect example of this is me, as I'm trying to build my Your Creative Push YouTube channel, where I'm making videos that are more bite-sized doses of inspiration or information or education, instead of just honing in on a topic and speaking from my heart and trying to speak to, like my avatar, like I do on this podcast, to just one specific person. I'm instead falling into that trap of listening to these so-called experts who are telling me that I should be making videos that aren't in too popular of a niche so that they'll have a chance to rank in search. And then I'm thinking about my metadata, like I'm thinking about my title and my thumbnail and all of these things that aren't aimed at you, that aren't aimed at a person that is looking for that answer or that needs that one-to-one human connection. And like I said, this is a ridiculously easy trap to fall into, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much time. It doesn't take many followers for you to start seeing that follower count as just a number. And when it increases by one, it's just the number increasing by one instead of another person jumping on board, another person being along your journey or signing up to be there with you and to check out what you're putting out. So as hard as it is, try to remember that there's other people on the other end of that follower count, other people that are, like I said, signing up for what you're putting out. Doing that will not only help to sort of recenter you when you're making your art and when you're putting your stuff out there, but will also help you to, like Tom and Mike were saying, to build that following, to go out and seek those people who are looking for those answers, who are looking for your art, so that you can bring them in on your journey and add them to your group as opposed to just adding a number to your follower count. On our next episode, we have Will Terry. Will is an illustrator who was on the show back in episode 176, and he comes on the show next week to talk about what he's been up to since he was last on and to share the exciting details of his new book, What They Don't Teach in Art School, An Illustrator's Guide to Making Money in the Real World, which is currently being kickstarted. If you want to find out more about that book or Will, you can head to his website, willterry.com, and on Instagram he is willterryart, and we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page. Again, yourcreativepush.com/362. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done, so go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much. And remember that the universe needs your creations, and you are the universe. We'll see you next time. Hey YouTubers, if you like this episode, I handpicked another one for you. I think you'll like it just as much. Just click it right there on the left side of your screen, and on the right is a playlist of episodes from guests that came from the same creative field as the one that you just listened to. And please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out before it goes away. Enjoy the next episode.